committee members that are actually chairing other committees. So I'm going to give them just a few more minutes to get here. We had intended and hoped this to be just an exchange, question and answer exchange between the committee members and the departments, because you guys did a good job and we had those budgets presented earlier. Given that we have all these conflicts, Chairman Bernard and I have just decided that we'll do the budget ourselves. And no, in all honesty, we do have conflicts and people will be joining us. So what we'll do with this format is ask you again to perhaps do a brief overview of your full presentation that you made when we had the earlier 08 hearing several weeks ago. And then those members that are here, we'll try to go through that. I would also ask, I know some of you have brought by documents or requests of things that came up after the budget had to be submitted. If you would make note of those today, and that would be the appropriate time, unless you wish to do it at a different time, to make sure that nothing is missed for consideration, so that we could do that. Also, at the end of today, we will be trying to formulate a go-forward position for 08. I believe the plan is to have the 07 budget on the House floor next Monday or Tuesday. I don't make Chairman Harbin's schedule, but I believe it is not out of the realm of possibility that we would have the 07 on within the next 2 legislative days, at which time we'll move on to the 08 for a recommendation from the subcommittee. Given time is short, what I will be doing is trying to assign to each department 3 members of the subcommittee to make sure that we get down to the details of each of the requests. Again, if you wish to talk to me or one of the members of the committee that's not on the 3-member subcommittee, if you will, feel free to do that, but we're just going to try to make sure that we cover everything because of the time compression issues we have because of 07 coming out late due to issues we all know at the federal level. So if you'll bear with us on that, we're going to try to set that up and have those members available the end of the week going into next Monday and Tuesday when we're on the floor with our goal at putting a recommendation together of the 08 budget sometime next week, and then subject to Chairman Harbin's schedule. We're going to go ahead and start. I know everybody's time is valuable, and I know people have places to go. I know I had the list. In no particular order other than what's listed on the agenda, we'll start with the Court of Appeals. If you'd like to make whatever level of presentation you choose to do so,
yes,
based on the fact you've already given us a very good one previously. Well, I think the Court of Appeals in our document is going to be Section 5, page 4 of 35. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Charlie Michael. I'm one of our 12 judges. As I mentioned before, Georgia has an intermediate appellate court with only 12 judges. Some smaller states, North Carolina has 18, Louisiana has 54 judges on their intermediate appellate court. Traditionally in Georgia, we've kept our overhead as low as possible by minimizing the number of judges and increasing support staff. We are not asking for any additional judges. They are very expensive. The highlights I wanted to reiterate on our budget, the first 2 items shown on your page, 5.11 and 5.12, are carryover items, except that second figure, which is shown as $375,968. I want to emphasize that actually there was an increase in the proposed state health benefit plan payments from agencies. Not being an executive branch agency, we didn't know about that until the governor's book came out, which by definition is after our book goes in. So actually the increase would be another $547,000. So really that second figure, instead of $375,000, actually we're asking for $923,106. Now we've submitted that in writing, and we'll do that again in accordance with your instructions. But that, of course, is an item over which we have absolutely no control. It's simply told that that's how much health care we'll pay. I wanted to mention the enhancement items that we're asking for. We are asking for one additional staff attorney and one additional administrative assistant. Both these would be floating positions, not assigned to any judge. Right now we have 3 floating staff attorneys, but we have 4 panels of judges. If we could have one additional staff attorney to help with our central staff, it would be an enormous easing of our workload. We handle about 290 cases per year per judge, and the national recommendation is 120 or 125. So we push the work, but we need these administrative helpers. Both these are budgeted at the minimum entry-level positions. We're also asking for $30,000, which would be an emergency disaster relief plan, which would set up alternative computer facilities in Macon in the event there was some disaster in the Atlanta area. I did want to mention the last item. There's a misprint on the sheet. We asked funds for the increased rent in our facilities in the old health building. The sheet you have says provide funds for renovation. That's an error. Actually, that's an increase in rent assessed to us by the GBA, and of course, again, we have no control whatsoever over how much the GPA charges. Are there any questions, Mr. Chairman?
Committee have any questions of the judge before we go forward? Well, take your time to settle in. We started a little bit late. We have, I know, conflicts with committees around. We are on page 5 of 34. I'm sorry, page 4 of 35. Sometimes I'm dyslexic, and sometimes I just get things backwards. So. Give us just a second, and we'll let Representative Powell.
Yes, sir, and as soon as we know which 3 you want us to coordinate directly with, we'll do that.
Yes, sir. Judge, if you wouldn't mind, for Representative Powell, talk about 5.1.2, that your annualizer for the state health benefit.
Yes, sir. We submitted our budget in August, but we did not know until after the governor's book comes out that there was an increase in the state health benefits premiums that each agency must pay. Of course, as I understand the way the budget process works, we submit our figures and the governor submits them to you without change. We didn't know till after we had submitted the figures that all the executive branch knew that the health benefits were going from 16% of the payroll to 22% of the payroll, which comes to $547,000. So actually, the second figure on the right, item 5.1.2, which is shown as a lot of money already, $375,000, is actually $923,106. And we've asked for that in writing because we've got to pay that increase. And I apologize that we didn't know about it, so it's not reflected on this sheet, but that's just the way the process works. And I'm sorry the sheet is not accurate, but we didn't know until the governor's book came out that there'd been this fairly significant increase in health care. And of course, that's a subject y'all know more about than y'all have heard probably much too much about, is health care.
Sorry, Judge, can you give me that figure again? It should read what?
Yes, sir. It should read $923,106.
We'll work this out when we, Judge, when we get with the committee, but I want to make sure. I mean, I understand what you're talking about, but the line reads you're annualizing the 2007 number, which went from 14 to 16, which you did reflect properly in the 07 request.
Yes, sir.
Right. But you need to annualize the 07 number.
We analyzed the 07, but
The answer to your question is yes, sir.
No, I understand what she's saying, but this number reflects the $375,000 number reflects the change moving forward from 14 to 16. You need that to go to the 22. I forget exactly what the decimal point is, but you need that to go to 22%.
22.843.
Right, but you also have in there, in that line item, the rent increase and the reinstated funding for 2 positions. That's all. That now is in the 375.
Yes, sir.
So your additional monies is simply the increase between 16 and 22% of help. I think that's real. I mean, the committee's seen this in other places, but I mean, now the committee realizes that the state is paying in health benefits, the state health benefit plan, the state's portion, in addition to what the employees, are paying in their share, almost 25% of salaries for health benefits. I mean,
yes, sir.
It's across the board. I'm not pointing that at your department. I think it's just important for people to realize the increase in the last 2 years from 14 to 22% is what is costing the state. So for every dollar of salary, we're paying almost 22 cents additional for health benefits for our employees. Okay. Are there further questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. What number? Number 18?
18. Thank you. Charlie, I wanted to ask you about the pay raises.
Yes, sir.
5.1.1. If I remember from what you spoke of earlier when we spoke, the judges are taking a 2.89% raise in order to increase your staff raises to 4%. Is that how it's done, or?
I'd like to say yes, but the truth is, I think it was in the law that all department heads could only take 2.89%, that higher paid employees would be limited to that. So I think that was the max that the judges could take anyway.
Okay.
My staff can correct me, but I think that was in the Pay Raise Act. Then each of our judges counts as a department head for budget purposes, I think.
Okay, I was thinking, I heard earlier when we spoke that the judges had gotten together and decided to take some of their requests and add to the staff.
If I gave that impression, I apologize. That is not my understanding of what happened. I'm sorry if I misled you.
So that's fine. No, I just may have misunderstood. So basically, we've got a 4% increase for staff alone, and you're asking for what you assume to be the max of 2.87 for your judges. What's the why the difference between the staff and the and then in line 511, which is only a 3% for the I'm not so sure I understand what the difference is in 5.11 and 5.15. Can you help me with that?
I think our instructions from the governor's budget people was to assume a 3% pay raise for all state employees effective January 1st, 2008. And so we said yes, sir, and figured in that number. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm.
So do I understand this correct? And that's a 3% on top of the 4%?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up, I think the recommendation we sent to the full committee for its review actually recommended the 4% that's reflected on 5.1.1 be 3%. It was this committee's recommendation for the amended 07 budget. So if that, in fact, goes forward, we will know that, and we will need to annualize the amount of the increase that passes, and that'll be somewhat a moving figure to until
Yes,
the
sir.
07 budget comes out of conference committee, but we'll probably, we will need to annualize the number that's agreed upon for the 07
That's my
budget
understanding.
as we go forward. If there are no further questions, we'll move along.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and we will let your office know who your group to work with.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
The Judicial Council representatives. And I'll say again, this is meant to be a conversational session, so we don't expect a lengthy.
You remember my last presentation, don't you? Really, if y'all have any questions, we are, I don't know which document you're working from, but we are 6.1.
5 of 35
right.
on our pages.
I mean, if you want me to hit each of the improvement items, I'll be glad to do that. Or if you all want to look down that list and see if there's anything that you have particular questions about, however you want to handle it.
Are there any questions? Again, this was meant to be a conversational mode dialogue with the departments, so there's not per se a presentation. We had that a couple of weeks ago. Remind me again, I'll start while the members look. Remind me again on 6.3, you don't have our document, do you? Are we working off the same page?
I think the numbers are the same.
6.3.5, the increased funds to the University of Georgia contract for additional training, $199. Remind me what we're doing there.
That is an increase in the training cost for the Institute of Continuing Judicial Education, which is done through a contract with UGA for the increase in judges and the increase in the mileage that has to be paid for travel for judges to go back and forth to training.
But this is an increase in funds to the university.
Well, because it's in a contract to the university. So I'm not sure that's the exact language that we had in our document.
Okay, I guess I'm getting at, is the university system charging us more money to train these, or are we sending more people?
We're sending more people.
Okay.
Yes.
So we didn't have a
No,
fee
the
increase,
university's
if you will.
not charging us more.
You know,
No, sir.
they will sometimes
I know.
increase their fees to
Right.
balance their budget on other
Administrative
departments.
fee, right. But no, they did not do that.
Okay. We also have the situation where we would need to you've asked for an annualization of the 4% pay raise, and we would annualize that at the amount agreed upon by the 2007 conference.
Yeah, and we would hope that the same consideration will be given for our health insurance increase as with the other judicial branch agencies to increase that. That was something none of us knew about until the governor's budget document came out.
So in your 6.2.2, you're just reflecting the...
From the 14 to the 16, yes.
Okay, that's 6.2.2 is reflecting the annualization before, and you don't have another line. I see, you don't have another line within each
Correct.
department to
Correct.
reflect another increase.
Correct. But we have talked with the budget office about it.
Okay.
Would you like for us to get you the exact numbers?
Well, we're going to obviously need them to budget. Or Michael, do you have that information, or do they need to provide that? Do you need them to provide it for you?
I think
Okay.
we've given it to him. I just don't have the numbers with
No,
me.
that's fine. If we have it, that's something we need to have for our consideration. Representative Powell.
Deborah, tell us a little bit about the number of personnel that falls under the continuing judicial education. How many people y'all have?
Actually,
Administer
those are University of Georgia employees, and they're paid under that contract. We actually contract with University of Georgia, so those are not our employees. They are actually UGA employees that are paid through that contract.
So on 631 and 632, y'all are just adding that as a line item to go on top of the contract?
Yes, sir.
So they're not already paid under the
No, sir.
chancellor's budget?
That's correct. That is a new position. That 6.3.2 would be a new position.
And 6.3.4 creates a new position to administer, new administrative position.
Yes, I'm working from a different document than you are. I'm sorry.
You say, yes, that is a new position.
That is a new position.
Just so we understand, because I think we are when we're talking about numbers different. The 127,000
You're wonderful. Thank you.
is the new position.
All right, what number did you say, Representative Powell?
634. Says increase funds for position to administer the Georgia Council of Court Administrators.
Yes, sir, that is a new position. Now I've got the number right.
How is that currently being?
It's not. It's a brand new. It would be a brand new initiative, a brand new position for a certificate program for court administrators.
Did you have further questions?
I am looking under 6.2, just for my own knowledge, but 62.4 increase reflect adjustments in the workers' comp premiums.
Yes, sir.
48,000.
Those are the increases from last year that were not included in our budget. Same as with the COLAs.
Just from my own knowledge, do y'all have a lot of workers' comp claims?
Not to my knowledge, but that is
a lot of fingers that get disabled from taking computer boards.
That is just it's my understanding that is a statewide rate that's applied to all employees at the same rate, just like the health insurance.
Representative Powell, I think you've hit on something here, and Michael might be able to help us with it. We had a large increase for another department, and didn't we fund? Wasn't workman's comp funded out of reserves for a while, and now they're in a position where they're actually billing departments? I know I can't recall which department. We have several, and I apologize, but we had some where their workman's comp monies had been 6, 8, 12,000. That was it. You and I were talking. It was actually your group. Okay, it was Sandy. That we got an extraordinarily large number in the request, and now I remember. I'm seeing heads nodding in the audience. But it is not reflective of an annual premium. It's basically the reserve gotten down, and we're being hit for a catch-up number.
Well, I think the reason I brought that up is that, this is an age-old question that goes back many years. We used to hash this thing around. We've got departments like the judiciary, which obviously there's not a whole lot of workers' comp claims, but they're being penalized under this current formula. And that each department should be set at a certain rate that would be commensurate with whatever their loss ratio is. So, we've got folks like in this particular budget that they probably don't. I don't guess. Do you know of a case that y'all have ever had an employee that was under file a workers' comp claim?
Not in our agency.
So
no.
what we've got is we've got tremendous number of budgets that, while that may be the prescribed policy, it doesn't actually give a reflection of what, they're sitting there with these other figures that are being tossed in because that's the policy is straight across the board.
Well, I agree, Representative, and I think one could assume there's no incentive to try to not have claims within your department if you get assessed the same.
Right.
Regardless, so I think that's a good point. And
another concern goes back to my previous question on the continuing education line item out for 10,000, 19,000 for the 4% pay increases to go to the university system. If they're doing a contract, it should state whatever that proposed contract is. And that's what it should be, because we all know, those who've been around long enough, we know how the shell game is played with the university system. We can't ask questions with the university system by law. The only thing we can do is set their budget. But when the day comes and goes and the legislature's out of session, there's nothing else we can do as prohibited by the Constitution of dealing with the university system. I think my comments are directed as such that over the years, there are those of us who had a lot of concerns in past years about the judiciary's budget, that actually it looks inflated, but they get to wrap the things that they're not getting the true benefit to. I see somebody shaking the head with agreement.
We saw, yeah, I saw that earlier. I think you're right. Those are good points. I think those, Ms. Nesbitt, when we get you with our working group of three, that you may want to drill down that. I am, curious, as along with Representative Powell, about we're adding a position, but then we're doing I'm curious to what the contract covers. Shouldn't we just let them hire the people that they need and do a contract? I mean, we may not be there now, but it begs the question of me entering into a contract with somebody to
Vince can probably speak to that better than I can.
Okay. If you don't mind, just so they can have it on a recording. These glasses are too strong. I have them all on it. Not strong enough to have them all. Yes, sir.
Vince Harris.
Yes, sir.
The contract with the University of Georgia is for roughly $500,000, and it's been that for a long time. This additional funding is for per diem cost and just increased costs for meeting expenses due to the fact that new judges have been added to the judicial system over a number of years, and the budget for the ICJ has not grown. So the University of Georgia gets $500,000, and then the rest of the budget is supplied for reimbursement to the judges for per diem and the cost of the conferences.
That's out of that 11. That's out of that 1.1 million.
Yes, sir.
So the UGA is paid $500,000 as a base contract.
Right. It's $485,000, something like that, and then the rest of it is used for conference expenses, per diem cost, speakers, this type of thing.
Roughly $600,000 for the add-on over the base.
And those the $500,000 is for 5 employees, 5 full-time employees, and maybe an intern here and there. And I think it's 10% overhead.
Well, let's just say I'll be one of the 3 people that'll be working with you on that, and Representative Powell can be one of those 3 if he'd like. And I share his concern with making sure you guys get the value for your dollar. I'm a graduate of the university and love them with all my heart, but I think when things just are that way for a long time, and they're just getting the funds, and you're in a position that you have to request funds to pay them, perhaps we'll help you look at that and make sure we can get you a better value.
That contract has been in place a long time.
Well, it may stay in place a much longer time, but we're going to see if we can get you the same or more for the same or less.
And if I might, and let me give an explanation of my comments on that, because I'm one who certainly doesn't have anything to lose by saying this. But, for years, in dealing with these budgets, we had an awful lot of fun over the years back when we used to have people that used to hide tremendous sums of money in the judiciary's budget, because that way it could be used for and shifted, after it left and got into certain other exclusive committees of the House. But my concern then, and it's even more now, is that if we're going to have truth in budgeting, we need to have truth in budgeting. Lay it out so the decisions can be made. The judiciary has long since suffered because of that process. That we didn't. There was always a tremendous amount of suspicion about what was really needed by the judiciary for accuracy and budgeting purposes. And I think that maybe for the benefit of the committee, and I wish other committee members could be here today, but I think that for the benefit of the judiciary as a third branch of government, it's important enough that there be some factual reporting into the budget figures, so that to get rid of that cloud that may be in people's minds about are these numbers, are they padded, and things like that.
And we certainly support that.
Because we want, I think that everybody here would like to see, some factuality in the numbers we're dealing with. Now y'all know why I sit apart from everybody, so if anybody wants to shoot, they won't hit innocent bystanders.
We're happy to be here with you. Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Juvenile courts. Please.
We are on page 7 of 35. And pretty much our budget for 08 is a continuation of 07, with the exception of asking for the 4% raise for 08, January 1st of 08. So, if anybody has any questions.
Out of the, I'm sure I'm going to ask a question here I don't want the answer to, but I'm guessing you didn't get told about the 16 to 22% either?
No.
Okay. Committee will remember, I don't know if you have questions, but you remember I think our recommendation was for approval of this mileage increase. We're annualizing that in the base budget in 7.1.4. Same thing with 7.1.1. We'll annualize that number based on the conference report. Does the committee have any questions? You must have done a tremendous job.
Thanks. That was easy. Thank you.
Thank you. Prosecuting Attorneys Council. Do you guys want to wait? I know Representative Houston had some questions. Do you want to wait for your presentation and give her an opportunity, or if you're ready to go, we'll go ahead.
Just a personal
Please.
conversation.
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, I intended to. I kind of wanted to tell you where we're going with that. I was asked those questions last time.
Sure. Well, then.
I have a couple of observations from having been here for just a minute on the things that you've asked that I might shed some light on too. The 2.89% raise for judges was the same as it was for district attorneys, and that applies to elected officials as opposed to other staff. So when the judges asked for the 2.89, it was because they were elected. Just to clear that up. And on the workman's compensation matter, it is. We pay a premium, and you would think that would not we'd not run into too many job-related injuries that would call for workman's compensation. However, about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a district attorney who fell down steps, the elected district attorney, and of course workman's compensation kicked in there. It paid his salary for 2 years, and then some significant medical bills. He is paralyzed from the neck down to this day, and still receives all of his medical benefits from the workman's compensation program. So while the premiums may be high, when they're needed, when that is obviously needed, it is a significant amount of money that the insurance does cover. That was District Attorney Queen. He, of course, could not and did not run for re-election, but is still a retiree of the state of Georgia in that regard, and still has that obligation. The Prosecuting Attorneys Council administers 2 budgets, and I would like to hit them very briefly because we are asking for no particular enhancements in the matter. The district attorneys, it pays their staff, the assistant district attorneys, 2 secretaries for each judicial circuit, and 1 investigator for each judicial circuit. It's a total of about 600 employees that are paid through the Prosecuting Attorneys Council on behalf of the district attorneys. The only thing that we're asking for, we also have some victim advocates. We have 17 at the moment, and only 17 of the circuits do have the victim advocate that's funded. So one of the things we're asking for the committee to do and for the legislature to do is to take some money from a program that we are doing in the Prosecuting Attorneys Council that will be finished this year, and redirect that funds into the DA's budget so that we can hire a few more of those victims advocates to put them in other areas of the state that do not have them. We think we can hire, with the $350,000 from the data exchange project that is in our budget that we will not be needing for next year, to redirect those funds to the DAs, and we may be able to put as many as 7 more circuits up to speed on the victims advocate position. And that's what we're hoping to do. And frankly, that's about the only change that we have. We, like the others, had no advance notice of the 22% rather than the 16%. The 16% was an increase, and the 22 makes it even more significant increase, and it is a big number. Again, we're not asking for any enhancements in our budget. I was asked a couple of questions last time, and I felt bad that I couldn't give you an answer, so I promised then that I would do something to get you the answers to the questions that were asked. And it was about a special fee that is attached to fines where 5% is added to each fine, and those 5% monies were then how they were handled and where they were going and how they were being used. And I have started working on that situation, and with the assistance of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, I can give you some information in that regard. In 2005, that 5% money that was collected amounted to $9,908,473. And during that same period of time, restitution that was collected in courts and paid to the Victims' Compensation Program at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council was $80,569. In 2006, the money collected on the 5% victim set-aside was $10,822,789.76. And during that year, $172,640 was claimed as restitution by the Victims' Compensation Program of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. The efforts that I've made to try to get more information about this money and how it is accounted for has pointed out some deficiencies in the system. Basically, the law says that the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council promulgates rules about how this is done, and that has been done. The money is sent to the Clerk's Authority, and then the Clerk's Authority returns it to the counties, and that's so that it can be accounted for to that point. The counties are responsible under the rules to report how they distribute the funds, but compliance, to say the least, is spotty in that regard from what we've now seen. And the people who receive the money as grantees from the counties should submit an annual report as to how they have expended and used the funds. And again, not only do the counties are spotty in their compliance with those reports, the people who receive them are even more less likely to comply with the rules. And perhaps that's because the rules have no sanction. It just says you're supposed to do this if you receive the money, but it doesn't say you won't receive the money anymore if you don't. So in that regard, I happen to sit on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and am currently the chairman of the Rules Committee of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. So I've been working with staff of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council to have a meeting before our semi-annual meeting in May, and to promulgate additional rules that will have teeth in them about reporting and accountability for these funds. As a matter of fact, we're meeting on Friday morning in my office, several of us staff members, to come up with a plan to either cause people to lose their certification for victims funding if they do not appropriately report, or to not send the monies back to the counties if they don't tell us how they distribute it. Find some rules and put some teeth in them to try to make this $10 million is a lot of money, and it's taxpayer money, and it should be accounted for. And we're going to make every effort. We're not the only agency involved, but we are in a position where we can do something about making this money accountable. So that is what I wanted to report to Representative Houston about her questions concerning these funds. And what it has shown, her questions have shown that this money is not appropriately accounted for, and we're going to take some action to do that. Although it's not our responsibility alone, we feel compelled to do that. In addition to that, this fund and a lot of money that comes from the federal government for the service of victims goes through the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and we have discussed developing a statewide strategy for the use of those funds rather than let everybody compete without fulfilling an overall strategy of how we're going to deal with victims in the state. So in addition to the redoing of the rules about how the money is sent out, we're also going to press the point that we need a statewide strategy on the use of whatever funds are available, either by way of VOCA grants or by way of state appropriation or by way of the 5% victims' money, and that it be done with a strategic plan towards the best interest of the victims of the state. Now, I guess I've used my time for something unusual, but it was a question that needed to be answered because it did identify approximately $10 million of unaccountable funds, and we want to make sure those become accountable. If there are any questions about our budgets, I'll be glad to answer those too. The data integration project in the Prosecuting Attorneys Council budget is the figure I'm talking about, $350 moving into the DA's budget, $350,000. That project is substantially complete. Our goal in that was to put together a local data exchange project for a multi-county circuit, and the Cordele circuit was chosen, and that has substantially been completed, and the second phase of that was to duplicate that. And we're in the process of working on the duplication of that, and the $350,000 was to go towards that duplication process. There are a number of initiatives going on in the judicial system concerning data and the integration of it, and we are beginning to talk to each other about that better than has been done for the last decade at least, about how we will work together on getting this data integrated in an expeditious and a cost-effective way. And I think that that's a really good sign, because everybody before was wanting to have their own system and not share so much with the others. I would point out in the Cordele integration project, we've got the courts, the clerks, the sheriffs, the police departments, the public defenders, the district attorneys are all working together and all sharing data in a way that it should be done for a very cost-effective price tag. So we're very proud of this project, and we hope that when we work with the other agencies, we'll be able to present to the state a cost-effective and effective program for exchanging data in the criminal justice system. I've talked about what I was interested in. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them concerning the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I understand this transaction here, and maybe I missed the meeting where we discussed that, but the $350,000 we're talking about is on 8.2.1 on page 8
yes,
in the budget?
Sir.
Okay.
Yes.
No, so what I'm reading here is that, or what I thought I heard you say, is that you want to send this money to the prosecuting attorneys?
No, sir.
District attorneys, who is it?
It would be in our continuation budget as an item. We would want it removed from the Prosecuting Attorneys Council budget and put it in as item 8.1.5 above the $350,000 for the one-time expense of 1027, to move it over to put that as 10 victim advocate positions, perhaps somewhere between 7 and 10.
Okay. What I'm wondering is that, sometimes we get these things where once we put an item in the budget, it seems like it never goes away and never gets resolved. And I'm wondering if this has not become one of those, that that $350,000 is going to keep going from one place to another for one use or another.
Well,
because if we needed 10 victims witnesses advocates before this, how come we're going to get all 10 of them at one time, and why did we just decide we needed them now?
Actually, we need more than that. There are 49 judicial circuits, and there are 17 victims advocates that we have gotten over the last 2 sessions. So only 17 of the 49 circuits now have a victims advocate paid for by the state, although all are authorized to have one by law. we are asking for the funding that we have been using for the last two years for the integration project, which is now substantially complete, to be redirected to further the initiative that the governor set in place 2 years ago when he started the new restitution plan for the benefit of victims. So
are these the same?
It's the same money, and you're right. We are redirecting and asking you to put it in a continuation, something that will go year after year.
It's not really redirecting it unless it was already in the budget for the purpose of the victims' witness people, is it? I mean, if it was put in for one purpose and now we're asking for the same amount of money for some other purpose,
Yes, sir.
That's not redirecting. That's just asking for another $350,000 this year.
I think that's fair. I mean, what you have to look at is if we chose not to have 8.1.5, we would have $350,000 savings. It's a lot like the CNG savings we saw in the 2007 budget. We saw the Commission for New Georgia show savings, but they spent them in another program in the department. The same thing here. I mean, we have a $350,000 savings, but we have a recommendation to spend it. We could do one or the other or neither.
Well, my question is whether maybe this isn't the proper time for this, but if I can have another question.
Certainly.
Two questions. Number one is, there's never any shortage of places to spend money, which concerns me. I think we need to try to get a handle on spending wherever it is, and this may be a good place to do it. But secondly, and another reason for that, I think, is if the people who are supposed to be taking care of this money are the victims' witness folks out in the counties, I guess, and I know that there's been an audit of that operation back even a few years ago and determined that they weren't following up to get the money back from people who should have been reimbursing them for expenses that they got from other sources like insurance and so on and so forth. That hasn't been happening, and the law requires it. So I'm wondering why we would want to exacerbate that situation by getting 10 more people to do the same thing.
Well, in answer to your question, Chairman Knox, is that there have only been 2 years where there were restitution people in the victims' witness programs. That's the last 2 years in 17.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. I'm not talking about restitution people. The office is supposed to do it. It doesn't say anything about that. The law doesn't say that the restitution person shall get the restitution. It says they're supposed to get the restitution. Those people are responsible for giving people money and making sure that people who get money and are supposed to give it back to us do that. And we're not doing the second.
Well, I differ with your opinion of that. I think that it shows.
I think that's what I just heard you say. You said that it's not that we're not accounting for the monies, and that's one of the reasons why we're not accounting for it.
I'm saying that there were collections in 2005 and 2006. In 2006, it was $172,640 collected by way of restitution. Let me point out another thing. When the court orders restitution or a fine, it can only collect it if the person can afford to pay it. The court has to make a determination at the time of sentencing that a person can pay restitution. And that person's failure to pay cannot be the basis of a revocation of their probation unless there is evidence that that person has willfully failed to pay it. So restitution collections in general are woefully inadequate. I agree with completely about that, but that is the law of the state, that you have to prove their ability to pay in order to collect the restitution.
That's true, but that's part of the charge. That's what they're supposed to be doing. So what I hear you saying is they can't do their job, so we ought to ignore it.
No, sir. And frankly, the people who collect the restitution is the probation departments, Department of Corrections. And they simply turn it over to the clerk, who then sends it to the Trial Support Recovery. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
I think we're talking about two different restitution. You're talking about a restitution that the offender pays to the victim.
I am.
Okay. I'm talking about the restitution that this group pays, that these folks pay in the counties to people to have their house cleaned up or whatever happened to them.
You're talking about the crime victim compensation.
Exactly, and that's under the same umbrella, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it is a responsibility of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Yes, sir.
All right, and those amounts are absolutely not being paid any attention to.
I would disagree with that, as I said before. They are collecting more every year through their efforts. There are a number of subrogation claims, and there are a few waivers of subrogation, but they did collect $172,640 of that last year.
One further question, Mr. Chairman. the other thing that I'm concerned about is we're going to send this now to the district attorneys, this $350,000.
The purpose of that to employ
I don't care what they're using it for.
Yes,
they can use it for whatever they want. You can call
That's
it
what we're
parts
asking
or whatever. Okay. So we're going to send that $350,000 to them. What I'm wondering is we've given a number over the last few years. We've given a number of changes in the law to the district attorneys to make their job easier, to make them not have to work so hard. And what I'm looking for is when are we going to see the flow through in savings from the district attorneys for the fact that we have made it a lot easier for them to do their job?
Well, I disagree with your characterization that you've made it a lot easier to do their job. Most of the changes that have been made to the criminal code in the last couple of years reflect piecemeal changes, putting Georgia in line with the majority of the states in the country. For example, Georgia was the only state that did not have equal strikes, and now it does. We would not impeach the defendant with his record as you can do under the federal rules, but we can now because everyone else does. So I don't think we've actually made the job easier. I've had conversations with a number of criminal justice professionals that recognize that the criminal system in Georgia has been, I would say, neglected because the growth in this state has been tremendous and the number of crimes that are committed are going up dramatically. And the number of resources available to the courts, to the prosecutors, and to the defenders have gone up, but not at the same rate as it has in other areas. I say that it should be time that we recognize that the courts and the criminal justice system are infrastructure in this state. It is as important as the electricity and the water in a person's home that they have order and an opportunity to be safe in their homes. And we have cases stacking up in our courts now that they cannot reach. No matter how many attorneys you've got ready to try a case, if you don't have a judge, you don't have an opportunity to have that hearing. If you don't have a public defender,
90% of those are nonviolent offenses that involve drugs.
I wouldn't
those
say
cases.
90%.
I mean, case counting is an old game. You know that you can justify anything with case counts.
Right.
I mean, U-turn is a case.
We're going to give you guys an opportunity to talk about this in further detail. I don't mean to cut either one of you off, but we're working on the budget now.
I'm just answering
and
questions.
Nobody's going to believe me when I say this, but Chairman Knox, I mentioned when we started the meeting that I was going to kind of sort of divide and conquer amongst these departments with three-person subcommittees, and nobody's going to believe that I had this written down. But Chairman Knox is going to work along with Leader Porter and Penny Houston to work with you guys on your budget, and that was written down before the questioning started. But I think that'll give you guys an opportunity. I think he brings up, you have a good point that you want to advocate for those victim advocate positions. I think the chairman brings up a good point that we're moving one-time money over into a continuation budget. That may be a valid use and a needed use, but we just need to see what we're going to get at the at the end of the day for it, because we know we're going to continue that. We know it's going to have benefits. We know it's going to have salary increases, and it's a bigger expenditure when you move things into continuation budget. So let's stay on our budget thing. You guys can debate.
I would point out that we didn't do that by sleight of hand.
I understand, and when I'm finished, I'll let you point that out if you wouldn't mind. Y'all both interrupted each other, and we're not going to do that anymore. Now, I understand. You made it very clear. You took it from one place to another, and it's valid. It's a valid conversation to have, but the chairman brings up a good point that when you're going to move that money into a continuation budget, he's absolutely right. It'll be there next year. It'll have additional salary increases that go with it, and we need to see, I think what the chairman wants to see and what we need to be able to recommend to our committee is what additional Georgia is going to get for that, and we'll give you that opportunity to make that case and keep that money in. Do we have any further questions about the budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you, and I don't mean to cut either one of you off. You have a spirit of what Chairman O'Neill has referred to as a spirited discussion on the item. But we have before us the Prosecuting Attorneys Council Prosecuting Attorneys Council and District Attorney budget in Section 8. Is there any further questions on that? And did you have anything else?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You do. I do absolutely agree. You showed us the 350 where it was coming out, and you showed us where you want it to go, and you couldn't have been more upfront about it. But if we want to have some discussions, we'll let you make
I
it.
understood this was a question and answer session, and I may be a little verbose, but I was trying to answer the questions.
Absolutely. It's a good exchange. If there are no further questions, we'll move on down Superior Courts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll talk briefly about our, I believe this is on page 11 of 35, 08, 10. All right. All right. I wanted to talk about some of the items that are in the nature of enhancements, and the first that I want to talk about, because it's in our budget, is the one that we're most interested in, is our secretaries have fallen behind other similarly situated positions for the legislative branch and the judicial branch, and we are asking your favorable consideration for an increase for our secretaries. The pay plan that we have submitted provides a modest increase for the 4 existing steps. We're asking for a 5th step so that our secretaries won't leave after 16 years. Presently, that's the they max out at that point and don't receive any additional step increases after 16 years. So we're asking to add that 5th step so that we can retain these experienced assistants that do so much for us. The other items that we've asked for 10 law assistant positions. Presently, we have 197 Superior Court judges in our state. We have 69 state-funded law clerk positions. A lot of the newer legislation over the last few years results in trial judges being in the courtroom a lot more than we have been in the past. That makes it even more important that we have some support from law clerks who can do our help us with research and the other matters that we have to do in the office, and when we can't be in the office, we need that help. So we're asking for 10 positions to help address that need. We are asking for some help with our there was a budget reduction that in funds that we've used for judicial assistance. Judicial assistance helps us avoid delay that we would otherwise experience if we don't have a judge to sit in for folks like me who have to be down, or are given the opportunity to be down here to talk about our budget needs. But I have a senior judge who is helping with my cases that were scheduled for today. The alternative would be that I couldn't come, or that those cases would have to be delayed. That's what we use our judicial assistance for, and we're asking for some additional funds to address the budget reductions that we have experienced, I believe, in last year or the year before. I might say that we've adopted some new policies and procedures in 2005 for judicial assistance, which makes the active judges much more accountable than they have ever been before for their use of judicial assistance, in that they are required to have a reason and a specific date and time for the use of those. Their chief judge must approve that request, and the administrative judge must approve that request. So in many instances you will have 3 judges' names on the line as to what the purpose of that has been. And that has actually we've cut way back on the use of judicial assistance. What we don't know is how much of a delay we've built into the system as a result of that, because many of our judges are not asking for judicial assistance now that they have been in the past. We're asking for some, and this is a one-time item of $1.5 million, which we would use for providing some help for complying with Senate Bill 452, which is the bill under which the sheriff is responsible for security in the courthouses. Many of our courthouses still have no security at all, and while we understand that the counties should provide metal detectors and x-ray machines, many of them simply don't. They don't have the resources, they tell us, and we don't have security in those places. This would help us provide hardware to those circuits those courthouses where they don't have metal detectors or x-ray machines, stun belts, and those kind of things, which this day and time you need to make sure that everybody in the courthouse is safe. So that is a one-time item that we're asking for. We're also asking for some funds to help us do some education of our courthouse staff in what we do in emergency situations. What happens if there's a hostage situation? What are we supposed to do? If there's some other emergency situation, whether by a storm, a fire, what are we supposed to do with that and the purpose of that? And I believe that's $50,000 would be to provide some education throughout the districts. The money would be used to hire persons to come and educate us with that. That's on 10.3.4 on page 10. It says provide security training to judges and their immediate family, but we really wouldn't be using it for family. We'd be using it for court staff instead. I believe that covers most of the enhancement items. And are there questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trying to get more familiar with what your law assistants actually do for you, and in relationship to some requests that I've had out of the Atlantic Judicial Circuit. Have you already determined where those 10 positions will go? Do you know? Have you sort of got those allocated out already?
Well, we have 10 districts, so probably it would be one per district. The Atlantic Circuit, I think, is unusual in the number of prisons that
That's where I was headed to.
that are in the Atlantic Circuit. And the answer to your question is no. We have not. That decision has not been made.
Yeah.
But we, of course, I believe we already provide additional law clerks in counties with prisons because, of course, they have the bulk of the habeas cases that they have to deal with. And Atlantic has, I'm sure you know how many prisons they have, but I think they have more than one.
Yeah, we've got a good many, and from what I understand is that in relationship to maybe other areas that these guys are actually have little help and are actually putting in an awful lot of extra hours themselves when we actually maybe overcome that with maybe the assistance. I was just curious if you had plans of maybe putting one of these clerks in that particular circuit.
I'm sure that district and Judge Cavender and the other judges in that circuit would have an idea of where we should put law clerks. I might say that we do have a position in our Council of Superior Court Judges staff, a death penalty habeas attorney, whose job is to help those judges dealing with death penalty habeas, and so if it's, of course, there are a lot of other habeases, but the death penalty habeas, those judges can be helped by that position as well.
Sure. It's obviously, just in Tatnall County alone, there's better than 4,000 inmates.
Yeah.
with GSP being there and Smith, all of them being close security and max security, you'd get a lot of extra.
We know.
Appreciate you looking at that.
Other questions?
I do, and I think we've talked about this before. I'm going down. I'm on page 11 here. Your new funding request. We say annualized funds for the new judgeships in Cobb and Dublin, and of course we said yes to that in 07, and we'll stay with that through conference to make sure that we don't gate the process of the seating of those circuits, by way of funding, and we've been assured we are not. But my question is the same that I've asked previously. Your mid-year request for the two new judgeships was $362,038. Your request for funding those two judgeships for a year, annualizing that, is the same number. One of those numbers is double, or one of them is half.
You did ask that question, Tom. Come up here.
Just so we can hear. I think Michael may have that. I just want to.
This is Tom Merriam, our
yes, sir.
budget.
Good to see. Michael and I did work on that. Basically, the way the budget was put together this year is it shows the funding that was asked for in 07, so it's using the 362.07 number.
Right.
But the other half of that annualized salary for the judges that is in the continuation number, which is down here, the last item for increases, adjustments in health insurance, FICA retirement, and other costs.
Right.
That money is included in there. So the
Okay.
other half of the salary is in continuation. So it's not that we failed to ask for it; it's just shown in a different line item.
Okay, I see. So the number you have then on 10.4.17 would reflects all of your
shows the other half
additions.
Of those, that year's salary.
All right. Well, that makes sense. So
Yes.
That is the cost of essentially 362 is the cost of a one judge year, if you will.
That's right.
For the judicial side of a circuit.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fair enough. Tell me this on 10.4.10. I mean, these $1.5 million for counties with courthouse security issues. I mean, everybody wants secure courthouses. Some are doing it, some are not. I'd like to know which ones aren't, not today and not for broadcast. I mean, there's no sense in broadcasting places where they're not secure. Right. I don't want you to spread it, over. I mean, I guess it's probably public if people want to find out, but we're not going to just throw it out there for people to know where we might not be as secure as we want to. My question is, what happens to the courthouse that, right after, assuming we could do this, what happens to the courthouse that, needs something, needs a stun belt, needs a metal detector right after $1.5 million is gone? I mean, how do I decide to recommend $1.5 million, and that's going to take, some counties have already taken care of themselves. This will take care of some other counties, and we still leave some counties out. I mean, it seems like if there are county issues here, that's one of the things that we've put forward for the local assistance grants. I know people have brought those in for vests for police officers for certain public safety needs. I mean, why aren't these things, or why couldn't these things be taken care of in that method where each county is requesting what they need, or how am I assured 1.5 does it, or what's the courthouse that came in right after the 1.5 was spent? Just.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that these funds would be handled in a grant-type fashion, and they would go to those counties, for example, not to replace or upgrade an existing X-ray machine, but to the county that didn't have one. And I think it would be a grant-type basis on the district level.
Okay. Do you have any place else where you administer grants in Superior Courts?
Well, grants may not be the right word.
I'm not quite.
Yeah.
Then if you're thinking about on a, if you will, first applied for, most needed basis, I guess I'm just wondering if this is the right budget to go in. And some of my colleagues have been here longer than I, but. Is this the right place if it were to be a grant-type format for it to go?
Well, what I'm trying to think of, would it go under the Fair and Open Grants Act, being it's in the judiciary? That if it's a grant program, would you have to make the criteria
the same for everybody where it's competitive, or you list them out, one or the other. And I don't know if this part would come under that. That would be the term.
Well, let's look at just the details and estimation, because I know your interest is getting the money in the right place, as is ours, if it can be appropriated. So let's look into doing that. And then my only other comments is we would adjust it accordingly to your request. As far as 10.4.17 as the continuation, providing that number, per the conference for the 07 budget, things that were included and so forth. Does the committee have any other questions in regards to this, the superior budget for the Superior Courts? I guess the other thing to make note of is I think that the bill that's moving through the House actually contemplates the creation of 4 new judgeships, does it not?
Something I was familiar with, and hope that hasn't changed.
Well, the one that I believe passed out of judiciary employs 4, and I will Cobb, Dublin, Gwinnett. Brunswick is not in the
Gwinnett and
starts with an E.
And Oda.
It is in Oda. Yes, sir. Those are the one. That is what comes out. So we'll need to address that accordingly with the statutory inaction of those. I believe 2 of them were planning to start in January, and perhaps 2 of them in July. Further question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask an additional question with your secretary step raises.
Yes, sir.
Just brief me on that. What is a secretary with 16 years actually earning now, and what % of step are you looking at within this?
At 16 years now, if I believe their earnings would be approximately $43,000, which is I think it is about $13,000 less than a comparably experienced executive secretary in the judicial, in the legislative or executive branch.
Then your step, what will this 466, what will that actually do percentage-wise?
What would it go to?
Mm-hmm.
We have that document for them, Chairman. If you'd like us to provide you it's the current steps and what the step, because I believe the request is to add an additional step or this funding request adds an additional step. It adjusts actually the steps currently and actually moves those up some, and it also does it not seek to allow service credit.
Up to 5 years
up
credit.
To 5 years credit if one is moving from the prosecuting, like a DA's assistant, over into Superior Court. So this funding mechanism would basically handle all those. And I don't mean to cut your question off, but I know they've provided that to us just last week, and I'd be happy to get you that document, and it has all of those 3 things outlined. Committee have any further questions in regards to the Superior Courts? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll get you that whole document. Supreme Court.
They usually don't call the Supreme Court.
We were just thinking if we needed one of those. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, don't say that. They really did not have any new true enhancement items, only the continuation and annualizers for the COLAs.
All right. They have, if the committee would look on 12 of 35, Ms. Nesbitt represents it correctly. This is annualizing the things in the 07 budget, and analyzing a rent increase, and then the increase in adjustment for the state health benefit plan. So
that's correct.
They also have a workman's comp premium.
And they will be in the same situation as the Court of Appeals in that we are with the additional increase in the health insurance benefit going into 08.
Okay. Are there any questions in regards to this budget? Any questions? You must have done a tremendously good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The Department of Defense.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Reminder on some of our budget items. We have the normal common budget items and the annualizers. Page 19, I think, is the reference sheet. I apologize. In addition to the annualizers and the common items, there are three enhancement items in the budget. The first is item 19.2.5, $250,000, matches an additional $250,000 of federal money. We are in the latter stages of what is a 6-year plan at this point to renovate the armories across the state. They have made substantial progress on that. I think all of you in your districts have seen improvements in your armories and the availability for community activities in addition to the military uses. This item is the second phase of 4 planned phases to build a preventive maintenance program for the armories in the state. Like I said, as we finish the renovation, we're going into a phased planned renovation program, maintenance program to go with it. And you did the first phase of that last year. This is the second. The federal monies are programmed to match this, and then we're anticipating, per the original renovation plans, 2 additional phases of maintenance programs. Item 19.2.6 is the original maintenance renovation program for the armories was done under repair and maintenance money from the federal side, which had a limit of $750,000 to expend. With the condition of those internal systems, etc., basically the funds were limited to inside renovation and storage capacity. This is the first of a 4-phase plan, $500,000 in state dollars to match $1.5 million in federal dollars to now go back and improve the parking areas and the runoff and environmental pieces of the property. As you know, those properties are extensive in some cases. The exterior improvements, i.e. parking, etc., were not done at the time due to the funding limitations, and this is the first of a 4-phase plan to go back to those 70-odd armories and make those improvements to finalize the property improvements. The third enhancement item in the budget is item 19.3.5. You'll recall the Georgia Guard runs 2 youth challenge programs in the state, one at Fort Stewart, which has a funded capacity of 200 students per session. It's a 5.5-month residential program for high school dropouts. We have 2 classes a year at Fort Stewart, 200 per class funded. We actually graduate about 250 per class. We also have a program started in Augusta at Fort Gordon 5 years ago that's funded at half that size. The original plans and agreements of the General Assembly and the federal government where it would be of the same size at Fort Stewart, which is has economies of scales to best utilize staff, teachers, etc., to graduate maximum number of graduates. Since the startup of that program, and by the way, the facilities were improved and put in place at that time to handle a full 200 per session of students. Since that was originally funded 5 years ago, there's not been a time when the state had sufficient funds and the feds had improvements or additional funds in our youth challenge programs to increase the size of the academy. That is, the feds have increased their budget by about $15 million this year. They have allocated sufficient funds for Georgia to increase that size in Augusta, and these are the state matching funds. That's a 60-40 federal, 60% federal fund supporting that academy. The cost per student is from the Fed's program at $14,000. We actually spend about $10,000. We've graduated well over 8,000 kids who were high school dropouts from that program over the last 6 years, and with this increase, we'll be graduating about 900 kids a year that would otherwise have less than favorable futures facing them. Many of you have been to that program. If you haven't, we invite you to come, and we'd be happy to make arrangements for you to see it. The only other item in the budget, which is not on your tracking sheet, is a capital improvement request for $3,070,000. That is for a joint headquarters building to be built at Dobbins on the new old NAS Navy property, which will be taken over by the Georgia Guard as part of the BRAC process. That will replace all of the Guard facilities on Confederate Avenue, which are old and dilapidated facilities, centralize the command structure, which the Army is now at Fort Gillem, the command staff at Oglethorpe, and the Air Guard at Dobbins. That will match about $40 million in federal money. So the state match in there is about 8%, and that's to accommodate state requirements for support of the Guard and Reserves in the state. So it's a substantially federal program with some state match requirements. Those are the four enhancements items, and I would open it to any questions at this time.
Committee have any questions? I think we asked this during your first presentation, but the preventive maintenance programs you're addressing on 19.2.5.
Yes.
This money's I don't think this does them all. Am I correct?
Well, there are four phases to it, and by the time we finish it, it will be to support all of the armories on an ongoing basis.
Right. But we had talked. This is not the completing phase. This is the beginning, is it not?
This is the second phase.
Second phase. Okay.
Second phase. It's the first phase of the exterior parking lot improvements.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I think in your initial presentation we asked if there were, since that's matching money, if there were additional funds that could be found, because the longer maintenance is put off, the worse shape they're in.
Right.
But I think you related that this was what could be done in a timely fashion, that necessarily accelerated funding wouldn't necessarily be able to be adequately used. Is that correct?
With the federal budget being an October budget, this is probably the maximum federal funds we're able to program against it.
So
we'd love to accelerate it,
but we couldn't pull down any additional federal dollars.
We don't want to do it with 100% state money.
I understand. I just wanted to. I thought we had made that clear before, but
yes, sir.
That was my recollection. Does the committee have any further questions on these items? Three enhancements. Gentleman brings for the Department of Defense, as well as the annualizers, workman's comp increases. We're blessed in every department with that workman's comp increase. So, any questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. The final group we have for the day is the Public Defenders Council.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my name is Mike Mears. I'm the Director of the Public Defender Standards Council. We have provided the committee with the background material at our original presentation. You should have quite a bit of information about the details of the budget. I'm working off of the tracking sheet 13 of 71, and it would be items 9.1 through 9.2.7.
We're on page 9 of 35, but it should be that same sheet.
Okay, well, I kept hearing number 35, and I kept looking at mine. It was 71.
Yes, sir. We just have the ones that are pertinent to this subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, I will reserve all of my time for questions and hopefully answers, but I would point out that on line 9.2.2, you will see an item of $2,713,907 for 50 juvenile assistant public defenders. That is being removed. That, first of all, that does not affect the total of the budget request, because those funds were going to be absorbed, transferred in. However, we had anticipated legislation that would provide for the 50 additional positions. Since that legislation is probably not appropriate right now, we're going to remove that, and hopefully that could be something that the study committee that is working its way through the process now could look at this summer. This is a continuation budget of $37,422,285. That is from the $27.8 million and the $9.5 that we hope to receive in the supplemental budget. So this is a continuation budget. No enhancements, nothing new for this budget other than what the 9.590163, which is part of the supplemental budget request that we dealt with in the 2007 budget. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions that you or the other members of the committee may have.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody have any questions in regards to this budget at this time? Any questions in regards to this? Yes, sir. Sorry.
I'd like to ask a question just from my own knowledge of
Yes,
this public defender. There's a case that's going on in the state, and I'm not going to mention the case because I don't want to, glamorize this thing. But, most of us only keep up with it through the news media, and I know it's a very difficult situation because of the accused crime that was perpetrated. But it appears to me that when you hear things in the media that the judge is suspending this because of lack of money. In this process, and I hear and I don't really know the fact, I just hear what's in the news, and you can only believe part of that. But I've had some concerns about this that do we not have a process in here that I think the appointed attorneys are out-of-state attorneys that are being paid, and I hear $300+ an hour for this defense. Would this not have been something that could have fallen into this budget as a team or a death penalty defense team or something? Could you explain a little bit, just so, because I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about, but I know what I'm like everybody else that reads this, and I think everybody wants to do what's right, but
Yes, sir. Normally, this would have been the type of case that would have been handled by the Georgia Capital Defenders, and these would have all been in-house, salaried attorneys qualified to handle death penalty cases, and normally those would have been the attorneys who would be representing this particular individual. But because of a conflict that arose almost immediately in this case, a conflict of interest between the Capital Defender's Office and the court and the prosecutors in this case, a conflict was declared, and under the current statute, when a conflict arises in a death penalty case, the presiding judge appoints the attorneys to represent that individual. Normally, in a normal case, those attorneys would be appointed by the presiding judge, and then our office would set the rate and pay those attorneys at an hourly rate set by the council. In this particular case, that was not done. The presiding judge appointed attorneys, but not two attorneys, which would be the normal. 3 outside attorneys were appointed, and we provided 1 salaried attorney to help with the case. But the 3 attorneys that were appointed from the outside were appointed by the judge. Because the judge feels, and I'm not sure that anyone disagrees with him on this point, but because the judge feels that this is such an extraordinary case, and it would have been very difficult to find attorneys who could take on this case without creating even more conflicts, or who would be willing to take on this case, the judge appointed outside attorneys and set their rate at a higher rate. The rate was set by the judge, but he basically said the rate needs to be higher because of the extraordinary nature of this case. This is not a case that I don't think anyone could have anticipated happening. A conflict arose that I don't think anyone would have contemplated happening. It was like that proverbial merging of the bad stars, and they all collided in this particular case. And what has happened is because the attorneys have higher rates than what we would normally set, there's been an extraordinary amount of billing in the case. We so far, for the attorneys and the experts and investigators in this case, we have paid out about $1.4 million. I anticipate that before this case is over, at the current rates that we are being billed, the case is going to cost over $2 million. I have objected to some of these payments. I've objected to the level of payments, and I've objected to the judge. The judge has issued an order directing me to pay as requested by the appointed attorneys. And being an attorney, I've got to follow what the judge says. Now, we are in the process of reviewing whether or not we have an option to appeal his order or not. But right now, we've been ordered to make those payments. And I don't want this to be taken as a criticism of the judge. I don't particularly agree with the judge personally as a director. I don't agree with these fees. But that's my attempt to answer your question, is that this is an extraordinary case that was sort of taken out of our hands because of a conflict, and then very high rates were set by the judge because of his feelings that this is an extraordinary case.
Can you explain a little bit about the conflict? Being a non-attorney, I don't quite understand this.
Part of the
could have been this conflict.
There was a conflict, and one of the original attorneys from the Capital Defender's Office that entered an appearance in this case was not qualified under the Georgia rules of the bar to practice at this point. He is now, but at that point, when the Capital Defender put him into that case along with two other attorneys, it was discovered by the prosecutor that that attorney was not a member in good standing of the State Bar of Georgia. He was a member in good standing of the Washington, D.C. Bar, but not the Bar of Georgia.
Do you mind if I interject here?
You might as well, because I'm sitting here trying to digest all of this.
You know, and this is, and I guess we're doing the budget. I don't want to get down past what Representative Powell was asking about this, but I think it's important. That's not a conflict. That's a mistake by the Capital Defender's Office. That's not a conflict.
Chairman,
one could assume that somebody was trying to, create a situation like this. My question: does that individual work for you?
No, sir. He's the individual who's in charge of the Capital Defender's Office.
The individual who sent the at the time unqualified attorney. Does he work for you? Therefore, he works for us in the state of Georgia.
He works for the council. The council appoints him. I do not appoint him.
And I'm not. No, I understand. And I'm being. When I say, does he work for this budget we're approving?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I didn't mean work for you directly. I understand there's a council. What action has been taken, if any, that? And I understand this is personnel action. If you're not, has that been addressed?
It has, Mr. Chairman, and it's been addressed not only by the council. It was addressed by the State Bar in a matter which I'm not. I'm restricted in what I can say.
I'm not. Any question? Let me interrupt you here. Any question we ask you that cause you to violate Judge Fuller's orders or require any other personal order, feel free to tell us that we can't go there. But to the extent that I'm concerned with, one might assume that was a $2 million mistake.
Chairman Martman, I've made that exact comment myself. However, I'm not quibbling, and I'm not trying to shed any responsibility on it. I'm trying to be trying to be candid with this committee as humanly possible without violating the orders.
Sure.
I can assure this committee that that particular issue was addressed not only by the council in a personnel matter, but it was also addressed by the State Bar in a matter. That's the most I can say about that, because the State Bar action is a private matter between that attorney and the State Bar. It was a matter that was totally unacceptable to us. It happened, and when the district attorney filed a motion to disqualify the Capital Defender Office because of that particular matter, we had to take action, and a conflict was declared. I understand the question of whether or not it was a conflict or not, but legally there was a conflict at that point because the district attorney was taking action against the attorney in that office, and that created a legal conflict.
I might ask a question, and I understand what you're saying about the conflict. But when the conflict was identified, that there's been a mistake made by that office, could that have not been rectified? They could have withdrawn that counsel at that time and placed it with someone else?
The conflict was imputed to the entire office because the person in charge of that office had in error verified that person as being qualified to sit in that case. So the conflict goes to the whole office under the bar rules and under the rules, under case law rules at this point, because the person had been admitted under a procedure called pro hoc vici. He's a member of at that time he was a member of a bar outside of the state of Georgia, in Washington, D.C. He should have been eligible to be a member of the Georgia bar and had represented, as I understand it, that he was getting ready to be readmitted to the State Bar of Georgia. He entered an appearance. The case was proceeding through the first couple of weeks. It came to the attention of the district attorney, then to the capital defender, and then to my attention that the person had been suspended several years before from the State Bar for non-payment of bar dues. Chairman Martin, it was a terrible mistake. We did our best to rectify it, and it has been costly. I can't change that.
And I interrupted your question. I think that's probably for a longer and different discussion one day, because I had always assumed that, not being attorney, Representative Powell and I both not being attorneys, but I had always assumed when we said there was a conflict and therefore the defenders had, I assumed the conflict was the judge didn't feel that he could find a public defender in the Capital Public Defender's Office that would or could defend adequately the individual in question because of their knowledge of the other parties, the victims, if you will. I had always assumed that was the conflict in this case. And what you're telling me is the conflict in this case didn't have anything to do with the Capital Defender's Office being able to find someone to adequately defend the individual in this case. What you're telling me is the conflict exists because the individual running the Capital Defender's Office couldn't do his job. Maybe you're not saying that. Those are my words, not yours. What I assume now is it was not a conflict of finding someone that could adequately provide a defense for the accused. The conflict exists because of a misstep made in the Capital Defender's Office. That's what created the conflict.
Chairman Martin, I think that's a fair statement.
That was just news to me. I suspect it is news to 95% of the state of Georgia, because when they hear a conflict was created, I assumed it was because it involved people in the courthouse. I mean, we know what we're talking about. So this is news to me. I mean, again, we're where we are with the funding and so forth. But I appreciate Representative you bringing that up. I think it's interesting to know about the management of the whole the office. Did you have anything further? I interrupt you, Representative Powell, before we.
I do, but I don't want to say it.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll take that for a different day. Do we have anything further concerning the budget? Again, we will work with you, and I do personally want to have conversations, about we recommended, this subcommittee recommended the full request for the 07 budget as was recommended by the governor, because we didn't want to be perceived with the ongoing case in Fulton County. I think there's one in Gwinnett where in both instances the judges are doing dueling orders over this, and we didn't want financial issues to get in the way of those cases. That's not to say that, and you and I have had this conversation, that I think improvements and efficiencies can be had in the system, and we want to talk to you about doing that. But my last comment on this is, again, this subcommittee did what we said we would do 6 or 7 weeks ago. Is we would provide funding under the current situation, provide for a constitutionally adequate defense for those trials in progress as required by statute. I'll say, again today, as we've said in the past, the judge's continued comments about this legislature of Georgia passing a budget dealing with his courtroom are, in my opinion, out of order, and I'm in no position to rule him out of order or in order. But this budget never passes before this time, so I hope he will continue to operate his courtroom and understand that we will do our job in funding constitutionally adequate defense as required by Georgia law, but we don't do it in reaction to him or any other judge. We do it because it's the right thing to do, and we have the support of the House leadership and the Appropriations Chairman to continue to do that. Are there any further questions in regards to Section 9, the Public Defender Standards Council of Georgia? Any further questions? If not, I thank you very much. That concludes the items we have on the agenda today. Let me say this, that we will meet back tomorrow at 1 o'clock in room 515 for the additional departments, and I will get out to the members and also the departments, the individuals that I would like for them to work through their additional add items. If there's no further business before the committee, will stand adjourned without objection. Without objection, we are adjourned.